old movies had like this sixth sense of sorts. Like they had this soul, this like rawness, and you can't quite precisely knock what it is, but it's author or director having a genuine concern and want to tell whoever is observing the story something. That's what it's all about, and that's what this video is about. So subscribe. I have 105 right now. Okay, I have 106, but someone subscribed right after I took a screenshot. So, and yeah, and we do have a special guest later on in the video. Fishing Historic Places. You might be wondering, what does fishing have to do with movies? Well, he's seen a couple movies, probably more than me. Well, the difference between him and me is that he was alive during the golden era of film, the 70s, when Jaws and all that was coming out. And that's why I asked his perspective on things. And without further ado, Fishing Historic Places.
Remember, we were talking, and I said that I believe that like the
He picks up that up.
70s is the greatest period that Hollywood gives us. Maybe 1965 to 1980, 85, right in there, a 20-year period. It's because the movie was about the story then, and filmmaking was at its height pre-special effects craze. What we seem to have now is just gone right over the edge, first with special effects, and now with anything CGI. So people aren't making movies specifically to tell a story. They're making movies to highlight special effects. You can see that pretty clearly in all these superhero movies. Now they can blow things up and they can have these outrageously cool scenes that utterly dominate the movie. The story is overwhelmed by the power of the special effects. Now, as a visual experience, the movie's great. Like Avatar, or so many of these movies, when you're there, it was absolutely awesome. Totally wrapped your senses in it, right? But when it's over and you think back about it a day later, 3 days later, 5 days later, and somebody asks, tell me about the movie. The movie was really pretty simplistic. There wasn't a lot of depth to it. There wasn't a lot of twisting and turning. There was a series of scenes that revolved around out of control CGI and special effects.
What I notice people say about Avatar is that like it's not like necessarily bad, but it's like people say that it's everything that is good about cinema and everything that is bad about cinema in one movie.
I will say that Avatar, which I brought to see my daughters at the movies, is the best movie I have ever seen at the movies, and the movie I hated the most. And it's because it was so utterly reality suspending. When I was in that movie, I felt like I was in that movie. I was watching that movie with Katie and Virginia, and we were in that movie as a spectator, floating along in this crazy planet with the story going on. And then as you get done with the movie and you're talking about all that beautiful, the scenery, the music, the sound, it was a 3D movie too. But as we talk about it later, the story could have been written by a 10-year-old. It had all the depth that a 10-year-old would put into writing a story. It was utterly lame. Yeah. Now, we are going to see a time when Hollywood all of a sudden figures it out, and we'll start creating perfect stories like they did make
Renaissance.
The Lord of the Rings with CGI, and The Lord of the Rings was aided by CGI. That director, Peter Jackson, was able to make a perfect Lord of the Rings. Now, I haven't seen the movie Dune or Dune 2, but I hear that those movies are very true to Frank Herbert's book, so it could be that those, now I read Dune multiple times and I read The Lord of the Rings multiple times, so maybe I should go and see Dune, because if they did it right, I'm going to really like it.
I think you'll like it.
Now they remember they've tried to make Dune two other times.
I watched one of the what's it called? The David Lynch one.
Right.
It was. I mean,
the story was good. Right?
I know, but like it wasn't meant to be packed in those 2 hours.
That's another problem that movies have, and this is where Peter Jackson broke out with The Lord of the Rings. He said, "I can't take and make a movie out of the Fellowship of the Rings, the Two Towers, and the Return of the King. I can't make one movie. I have to make 3." And honestly, I bet you he thinks about it now and wishes he had made 6. Because each of those books are divided into 2 books. And it's just so epic, it's such a grand scale, and it did so well. Hollywood did not think that he would bring the audience back. You know, that if you're a producer of a movie like that, you got to get people to invest in making it, and you're going to tell 1/3 of the story, and people are like, no, nobody's going to want to just see 1/3 of the story, and are they going to come back for the second one? Well, he took and threw a Hail Mary pass, and he had that pass caught in the end zone, and he showed other directors what the possibility was, and we're seeing that in Dune. I think maybe that Hunger Games trilogy was an example of it. That was a trilogy that
people were investing in that.
Yeah,
it was never my cup of tea. It was like a
no. I saw the first one, but it was fun. But I didn't, I wasn't compelled to see another one. But the point is, that seems to have followed in the lead of Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, where you can actually, and honestly, I think the best thing that we've seen in cinema in years would be the mini-series in the modern sense. Go back to HBO's
like those like 9
Deadwood,
episodes.
HBO's Rome. Go back 20 years ago now to when they discovered that you could make a 10, 12, 15, 20 episode miniseries and actually put good production money behind each episode.
Because most shows have low production.
Right. Most television is low production. So what we saw with the miniseries is a whole departure, which brings the movie closer to illustrating a book, or a story. Typically, we take great books and we make movies out of them. But of course, as a result of the fact that you're doing it in only 2 hours and 20 minutes, you can't tell the whole story, and you got to hire a screenplay guy who cuts a whole bunch of great stuff out of the classic. And when he does, the people that are fans of the book, which is a classic, are left wanting. I mean, even Peter Jackson did that in The Lord of the Rings. He left out some major chapters in the 3 volumes that he presented.
Dune 2 also had to be like, they had to cut out a bunch of things.
Yeah, that's just part of the situation. But you asked me what movie I thought was my favorite movie ever.
Or like, yeah.
And I always say to people,
what's had the biggest impact on you?
It's hard to say, because I have to break it down into genres of movies.
Yeah.
Right? The Man Who Would Be King, awesome movie. That's 1973, something like that. 3 Days of the Condor, awesome thriller. The International, awesome thriller. There's some great movies that have been made recently. Pan's Labyrinth by Miguel del Toro, awesome movie. But I feel like when you ask me what movie is the best, I think The Exorcist, which is a movie that typically people think about as a horror movie. But what The Exorcist does that is so brilliant is it never ties itself up. When you're done watching the movie, you have as many questions as you did in the middle of the movie. It's a brilliant, open-ended film that tells us a portion of a longer story, and although they've gone and tried to kind of make sequels, the first movie stands alone.
Right.
The sequels are unnecessary.
So, The Lord of the Rings, I just watched all 3 of them, and what I noticed is that, you know how in, those special effects movies that use a lot of CGI, you tend to remember the CGI more than it occupies at least half of your mind. With Lord of the Rings, they save the special effects for, to emotionally hit you home. Not just to strike you with awe, but to strike you with a specific emotion. I think in the first one, I watched all 3 of them, just now, by the way. But there are those scenes where there's that first scene where Frodo peeks into Sauron's eye for the first time. That is horrifying. Or whenever he puts on the ring and he disappears and he's in that, I don't even know what that place is. I guess he's in his hate because that's what the ring is infused with, but those were memorable parts and they actually had meaning to the story. They didn't just do it because, Superman can fly, so we're gonna have him fly. I think it would be better if they use CGI in Superman with the same discipline that they used the CGI in Lord of the Rings. Then when Superman flies, he would probably just fly and then the screen wouldn't follow him. It would just cut to where he is in the next scene, or no multiple angles or anything like that, just what we need. The thing with stories is that, and Fishing Historic Places said this, but just in a different way, is that people are making movies to just show off. They need to get over themselves. They need to realize the point of a story is to spread a message that would, once you leave the movie theater, you are better off seeing it if you are better off not. And the CGI overuse and lack of need of use is the source of this, mostly. That and just bad filmmaking. And of course, when using CGI, you have to have a real balance and give the audience an understanding of what is normal to see in this film and what is supernatural in this film. Like, Gollum is CGI, but he's supposed to be a regular character in the film. Or, well, he's not that regular, but you know what I mean. Just like how when you're making a character, you make them based on their function in the story rather than how cool do they look in the story. The same goes for CGI. So as I said, movies back then were minimalist. They only inserted some music in the background if they really had to convey an emotion or whatever. And same thing with CGI. They only did it if they had to do it to scare you, or it's usually for some emotional impact. That's why in the back of my head, I feel like the real definition of movie is, well, the definition of movies according to Google is a story or event recorded on a camera as a set of moving images and shown in a theater or on television, a motion picture, or nowadays on your phone even. But I would add a little bit to that definition. I would say a story and event as recorded by a camera as a set of moving images and shown in a theater to be observed by humans. The point of stories is to learn a lesson without having to learn it the hard way, usually the hard way being how the characters in the story learned it. Or at least, epics were used to instill courage. It's supposed to resonate with you in some way. And even though I disapprove of the overuse of CGI, that resonates with some people. Not sometimes for the right reasons, but usually not. We've all seen a city get destroyed so many times in a superhero movie, we just simply don't react to it anymore. That's because we don't really get to know the people who were in that city. If Hollywood were a city and it got destroyed, then we could build it up even better by making better stories. And start making perfect movies. Not to say that perfect movies aren't already being made, but you get the idea. And that's all really what we came to talk about. Subscribe to both me and Fishing Historic Places, even though he makes much different content to mine, if you like mostly talking about fishes and stuff. But there's my channel, so you subscribe to me. But as always, subscribe and join the Discord, talk about film and stuff on there, and literally anything. I am determined to get that place filled up, so you better join. But yeah, subscribe. I'm out. Peace.